So the purposes of this, we can bring multiple benefits to the system. There's hot water tanks have a lot of lime scale buildup. There's scale on heat exchangers. You see in the picture of the scale and rust, there's a lot of buildup. This would be something that is preventing that the fire of your boiler or the heating source from actually heating your water. It's lowering the recovery rate. It's lengthening the time you've got to have the item run. So it's increasing costs of operation. Um, in cooling towers, because there's an atmosphere environment, you can get bacteria and algae that show up. They start to bloom, and if they're not controlled, you get really large bacterial buildup. There are such things as flocculation, so items start to stick together. When you see this large debris, it's all the small minerals binding together. The ions have changed their characteristics and are starting to stick to the piping walls. There's also a reduction in corrosion because the minerals are not forming on the wall surfaces. They're not binding to the walls. The items themselves aren't interacting as much. If you look on the right, this is the same operation, but with a water conditioning. So there's not as much buildup. There's a lot more water area for the heater to heat that water. It's going to run more efficiently. It's going to have a longer run cycle. It's going to last longer as a fixture. So brief overview, I'll keep it very high level of how water softeners work is on the left, you've got a resin. It kind of looks like the beads you might get in that little packet that comes with shoes, but the resin itself will have the water flow through it and then out to your domestic systems. How does it actually change and soften the water? There is a brine tank that you put the salt in. This gets very salty. It picks up that sodium ions, and through a recharge cycle, we'll flush this resin with sodium and negatively charge it to bind those hard minerals to the resin rather than out your water system. The reason you have to have drainage connections is you actually, for every one part of water you're using that's softened, you're going to have 2 or 3 parts that you flush out the drain in that regeneration. So very basic of the brine wash will start to push through, and during regeneration late at night, hopefully you don't hear it, washes through that salt, charges it all up, and flushes out the drain because you don't want to be drinking that salt water. After that, we start to refill the brine tank because we now have to get a new reservoir of salt water, and it starts to push any extra residue and minerals that have built up out of your drain pipe, and then it rinses all of that that resin so that it can be ready to absorb those ions. Through the cycle, there's a lot of water that goes straight out the drain, which is a cost to the building and a cost of utilities that isn't realized on use. So part of that saltiness in that brine is that cities and some jurisdictions don't allow it. There is a saltiness that you'll add to the system, and they don't treat for this in the waterworks. They'll typically send it out to an aquifer, and it's dealt with in a large scale or large system or pushed somewhere else. So utility companies love to pass that cost savings on to you. With a water conditioning, there's lower maintenance, lower cost of operation and utilities usage. There's no salt, there's no maintenance or constant top up, and there's no effect on the environment in terms of brining or adding a salt that's got to be removed, not necessarily at the building, but somewhere else in the system. If you look at a map of Canada and our hardness, we live right by the mountains. All that rainwater washes a bunch of the minerals out into our water system. We are not the hardest in terms of where we are located, but we are surrounded by very hard water. It's an issue that is dealt with by a lot of Western Canada, a lot of European countries, and it's a lot of based on the surrounding environment. We have mountains, they're beautiful, but they don't help with that hardness.